Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chassidus in the morning. 15 minutes to change our lives. Start off by giving tzedakah. Gedela tzedakah shmakaras geula. Yeah. Giving tzedakah. Bring Mashiach closer. We're going to continue davening for all the people that are still in captivity. We're going to focus today on Noah bat Leah. Mitzvah Hashem, her, Noah bat Leah, and all the hostages, and even the ones that are already back. And also all the soldiers and all the Yidden Eretz Yisrael leading around the world should be healthy, safe, begashis, beruchnius, and we should have no more need for davening for them. We should have Mashiach already. Okay. So today we're going to discuss a little bit of the process, how things come from this, like how things down here, physical things, like the example of apples or anything in this physical world, we can source it back up to its source in the spiritual worlds, and ultimately in Atzilus. Because like we were saying, that everything starts in Atzilus, and what's set for the years in Atzilus, Tina Shanim Kippur, that's what we're getting, and the process throughout the years to bring it down. Okay, page 295. The Hishtalshlus v'ishavus chachma dasiya, because through the Hishtalshlus, through the chain-like descent, and the bring out into existence of Chachma in our world, me Chachma Atzilus, from the Chachma of Atzilus, who al derech mashul ma shamru zechnu bracha. This is like what it says in Bereshis Rabbah. Ein lecha esev milamata she'ein eloi mazal milamayla hamake ve'emen gadol. The very famous Medrash. We talk about this a lot, and Medrash explains that there's no even a blade of grass below that exists without a mazel hitting it, so to speak, and telling it to grow. Meaning, and the point is simply, everything that we have down here is not just happened. The very famous story about the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker were going for a walk in the fields, and they were discussing Chassidus. And so as they were walking, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he pulled off like a leaf, and he started like rubbing it in his fingers. You know, like, and he was like spacing out. Well, he wasn't paying attention to what he was doing, but he was like in another world, thinking about what they were learning, what they were discussing. So a little bit later, like half an hour later, the Rashab told him, he says, back then you took this leaf and you did this and you ripped it up. It's like, what are you ripping up leaves on? Everything has a purpose, everything has a reason, and you were just haphazard. You weren't paying attention to what you're doing. Everything has reason, has purpose, has meaning. And this is what we're seeing here. That even a blade of grass wasn't just happened. Just blade of grass. It's there because there's a mazel, there's an angel that's making sure it grows. V'gavaya ma'gavaya, v'gavaya aleim kol hinyanim sheyeshnam be'esev u'pri hagashmi hare yeshnam b'mazel haruchni. In everything, the Rashab is saying, in everything, all fruits and vegetables and things that grow, and really applies to everything. There's a spiritual mazel, and level upon level. That's taking care of this. Things aren't just happen to be there. You know, it's all like you look at a building, you don't say it just happens to be there. You know, there's a building, there's a lot of construction that was taken into it. You know, I used to work. One of the many things that I did, I was a mashgiach for wine. And throughout my years, I went to different, I was in California, and in Israel I did it as well. And basically throughout my experience, I saw all the processes, from the grapes coming to the wine farm, whatever it's called, to the getting crushed, to the juice, and all the way to the point of bottling the wine. And you can't imagine how many people are involved in this process. How many for that? And I remember after that happened, especially after I went to the bottling plant, I got to take home a few bottles. And I remember we were pouring wine Shabbos, and I spilled a little bit. I'm not talking about kosher over the kiddush cup that you pour, but I'm like, we're pouring wine and it spilled a little bit, like a few drops on the floor. And I was like, I remember when I saw it, I was like, whoa, like, you know how many people went into making this wine? And these drops we just like drop, yeah, okay, a few drops. So many people. And this is what we're saying, that everything that exists in the world, we have to understand there's so much going on behind the scenes that we don't notice that makes it all possible. In every level, in not just in our world, in our spiritual world, is Asiyah Ruchni, and Yitzira, and Bria, and Atzilus, and all these worlds, and just keep them all the way up. There's a lot of stuff happening. V'hinei, hatapuach hagashmi, for example, the physical apple, yesh boi mesikus gashmi, has sweetness. You know, anything sweet. Think about it in anything sweet, you know, ice cream or bananas, whatever it is. Anything you have that is sweet, cake. Are we going to say that the fact that the apple is sweet is because in the dirt, the sweetness? And הנה התפוח הגשמי יש בו מסיקוס. גשמי, האם נאמר שיש בכוח הצמח בארץ גם כמסיקוס? Can we say that there's sweetness in the earth? ופשיטה שאפשר לאמר כן, על המזל הרוchני. It says it's obvious that it's not, it can't say this, you know, that on the spiritual mazel that makes everything grow, none of those levels, meaning in a certain sense, there's no place that there's sweetness. You can't say in the mazel, but it has a sweetness. Hata'amim, the mesikus, umerirus, gashmim, nimshachim, misharsha, mechesed, gevura. Shamesikus, nimshach, mechesed, umerirus, gevura. So really, we have to understand that the fact that the apple is sweet over here is coming from the chesed above. Not that above has sweetness, it has chesed. And how does chesed express itself in this physical world? One of the ways in the things that we eat is being sweet. And when something is more bitter, more tart, or let's say vinegar, so you could say the sauce of the vinegar or anything else that has a not bitter taste, I would say, but like, you know, the non-sweet style, that more a little harsh or maybe spicy, you could say where that comes from. That comes from gevura. So what I'm eating now, when I eat the apple, my apple that I'm eating is sauced in chesed. I know where it's coming from. It's coming from chesed v'atzilus. Next time you eat something sweet, you think about it. I'm eating chesed. I'm eating something that comes from the sauce of chesed v'atzilus. Shamasikus nimshach michesed u'merius megvura. V'harei chesed u'gvura hem inyanim ruchnim. Now, of course, chesed and gvura is spiritual things. Rak shebeishtalshlus v'seder yiridas. Madrega is midar madrega ach madrega is gashmu ach nimshach mechinas chesed mesikus. So in Atzilus, it's chesed. Through all the hishtalshus, all these chain-like descents, these, you know, it's these I can't think the word for it now, like contractions. Through all these contractions, you get to the point where you have sweetness. Meaning we're eating a sweet apple, we're eating honey, but we have to realize that in its sauce, it's chesed. It's not sweet in its sauce, and its sauce is chesed. And the chesed is coming down all the way till in this physical world, we have sweetness. And so with gevura and anything else, any type of thing that we experience, we can go back up to its sauce in Atzilus, in spiritual terms. Now, even though on one hand, the chesed of Atzilus and the sweetness of the apple, it's like, you know, if you so to speak, if you spoke to chesed of Atzilus and you say, hey, thank you for the apple, he'd be like, what are you talking about, apple? Apples, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like a whole different world. That's on one hand. Nevertheless, nevertheless, that's where it comes from. So on one hand, it looks totally different. On the other hand, that's where it's from. Like we see other types of things that are like sweet. Beruchnius. Tainug, like pleasure. Shel davar chachma. When you have pleasure from something you're learning, that's coming from chesed. That like sweetness, that feeling. You listen to a good song that it moves you in a very joyful way. Being happy, you could say that comes from the chesed. My happiness now is coming. It's in its source. It's chesed of atzilus. So gam kemisikus. Yeah. So to pleasure shall nigun shehu lamatim madregas meno. That's a lower level, like we said in the beginning. If anyone remembers way back when, right in the beginning, there's different levels of enjoyment, and we said the highest is chachma, is seichel, intellect, intellectual ideas. But then you have lower than that is music, which is higher than, of course, than eating and pleasure from food. So you have the pleasure from a song. And therefore, coming from chesed of atzilus, it comes down to different forms of sweetness, whether it's sweetness of a music, sweetness of an idea, sweetness of food, but all those sweet things are all coming from chachma of atzilus, from chesed of atzilus. And so too, you could say with the gevurah. When you have things that are tiferes, which is like the combination of two, so things that combined, that comes together. It's like a powerful song that's on one hand, it's like intense. On the other hand, it's very enjoyable. You could say that could be the Tiferes, coming from Tiferes of Atzilus. And Netzach and victory and overcoming obstacles. So when life obstacles are overcome, where is that coming from in its source is in Netzach. Also connection in Yesod. So the connections that are happening in this world are sourced in your side, in Atzilus. And that's what we're saying. On all those levels, in Atzilus, there's some form of connection. And that's where it comes from. And so too, who ha'inyan b'chachma, sheyesh ba gamkin gavoya me'al gavoya, she'achachma, she'v'eses first, asiyam, yesh la, gamkin erech v'yichus, the chachma of Atzilus. And so too with the chachma, the intellect that we have down here is sourced in the chachma of Atzilus. And through the many myriads of contractions, there's a lot of a process. There's a big process that has to happen to go from chachma of Atzilus to our chachma. Madregas, madregas nimshach mechachma Atzilus chachma asiyah. But ultimately, and this is sort of the two sides of the coin. On one hand, we're totally distinct, totally different. On the other hand, we're the same. We come from the same place. We come from there. We come from there. As much as we look very different, we come from there. That's essentially what we're showing here. We'll start the next bit. Okay. Agam, the Atzilus moved on and Brit in the Siyah, and this is we're going to conscious now on the other side. So until now, we're showing the connection they have. But now we're going to show that the disconnect that they have. Agam, the Atzilus moved on and Brit in the Siyah, even though Atzilus is very separate from the lower three worlds. And how can we say that it's through a cause and effect? A cause and effect implies that there's a connection also before it. But we're saying Atzilus is very different, because in Atzilus, the only similarity it has to the rest of the worlds, the lower three worlds, is that it's a world. But its whole characteristic and makeup is all godly. Like we said before, it's a world of pure godliness. Atzilus, from the word Eitzel, by, close to, next to, Samuch, it's next to God. Whereas our lower three worlds already have this vast feeling of separateness. It's not, Atzilus doesn't feel separate. It is separate because of the fact that it's a world, but it doesn't feel that way. Its whole feeling is godliness. Whereas the lower three worlds already start to feel a huge form of separateness. So how can we compare? So on the other hand, we're showing that Atzilus is very different, very separate from the rest of the three worlds. The Ishtalshelus, the chain-like descent that goes from Atzilus to our world and to all the worlds below it is not the same type of Ishtalshelus as it is within Atzilus itself. In the world itself, it's very different, the Ishtalshelus, the descent, versus the descent coming from Atzilus to Bria. So there's a big famous thing between Atzilus and Bria. There's a parsa. Parsa is a curtain, meaning what a curtain? You have blackout curtains. So basically, that's what happens between Atzilus and Bria. It's not just a descent, but there's like a huge curtain that it lets only a little ray of Atzilus in. Then in a parsa hu kamay mashal, for example, elasechel shehamashal hu davar zar masechel. This is like a mashal. A parsa is like a mashal. What's a mashal? You have an idea you want to express, but the person doesn't understand it. So what do? You give a mashal. You give an example of something that's totally different that they can understand, but that's nothing got to do with the actual thing you're talking about. It's just totally different, and then they have to go back, so to speak, and try to figure out what we're saying. The mashal done well, it can be to such an extent the person doesn't even know that there's a nimshal. The Baal Shem Tov would teach. We're going to finish up, but the Baal Shem Tov would teach in the streets. He'd go to the marketplace and would give stories. And the simple people, they just got a story, and that's all they got. The people, the Talmid Chachamim, they saw the depth in it. But what we're showing is, what we see is that for the simple people, it was just a story. And this is sort of the parasha does. It's like a mashal. What the low worlds, what they're getting so, it's so minute into what Atzilus really is. Now, even after you have this mashal that you gave, and now you say, now you understand this mashal, you understand this idea I'm trying to give. So let me explain to you what's the nimshal, what's the idea that we're trying to give over. So that understanding of the idea as we're trying to give over, you can't compare it to the way the idea it is by itself before I had this whole mashal. But together with that, as much as it's different, but it's still the same. There's not a different idea. It's the same idea. It just, the understanding of it and the way you got to understanding is from a very different place. It's the same idea, just in a totally different way. We've got to stop here. But Amit Hashem, we should appreciate when we do something, when we eat something, and anything we do, that it's sourced l'mayla, above, and let's think about where it comes from. Have an amazing day.